author's spotlight, unveiling the craft. Inspiring and engaging conversations here at Apex Media Global. Listen now.
The purpose of the book is to help others, to provide them with hope, inspiration, and courage, and a strong belief in God that everything is possible through Him.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Author Spotlight, brought to you by Apex Media Global. I'm your host, Monica, and I'm so excited to be talking to Les Duncan today. He has a rich tapestry of experiences, from surviving health challenges to shedding 120 pounds to navigating the complexities of a 45-year marriage with his wife, Sharon. He wrote all his insights from his personal successes to challenges in his best-selling books, and I can't wait to dive into them today. Once again, Les Duncan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Les, for joining us. It's an honor to just pick your brain right now. Now, I want to talk about how you started, right? You have, diverse selection of books that you've written, right? What inspired you to start writing, and how did you start as an author?
Well, what inspired me was people who worked for me, this has been many years ago now, kept complimenting me about my leadership style. And I knew they weren't kissing up because they knew that I didn't tolerate that. And they said, you ought to write a book so that others can learn how to lead like you lead. So that's what I did. I wrote a book called They Made You the Boss, Now What? Originally, the book was supposed to help, young new leaders who are moving into supervisor roles. But as I wrote the book, I realized that the advice that I had was based upon my more recent experiences and not just my first, supervisor title. So the book reads, should read How to Become a Great Leader.
That's amazing. So you started by just people complimenting you, and you started a book on leadership. Now, what made you transition to writing more personal stuff like your health journey?
Well, it was my health journey. I wrote a book called Brainstorms, Surviving Catastrophic Illnesses, just 6 weeks after a risky brainstem operation and a brainstem removal of a vascular malformation. I wrote it because at that point, that was my fourth brain bleed and my second brain surgery. And I had learned a lot about how to cope with and survive a serious, massive brain bleed, which led to strokes, which led me to be incapacitated and without any, I couldn't take care of myself. Sharon, my wife, had to feed me, dress me, wait on me hand and foot. She is truly the epitome of in life, in the marriage vow, which says in health and in sickness. During my sickness, she was there for me constantly. So I wrote this book because I had learned a lot about how to deal with these situations. And I knew that when I was going through my first 4 brain surgeries, brain hemorrhages, that I was confused and I didn't know what was going to happen next. And I didn't know exactly what was going on with me. So I didn't want anybody else to feel that kind of confusion or anxiety. So I wrote the book detailing what I had done to recover fully from, it's now 7 brain bleeds, massive brain bleeds in my brainstem, spine. And the purpose of the book is to help others, to provide them with hope, inspiration, and courage, and a strong belief in God that everything is possible through Him.
That's beautiful. And you mentioned your book, Brainstorms, and you just talking about your experience with your brain bleeds, right? And you mentioned that you were so confused at the time. And I imagine that when you were writing that book, you were constantly kind of reliving that situation, right? How did you overcome that? Was that like anxiety inducing for you?
It wasn't, I didn't have anxiety about writing the book because I saw it as a good thing for me to do. I firmly believe that for every bad thing that happens, there's a greater good to be found. And to me, this was my greater good, to help others and provide them inspiration and courage. And like I said, a strong belief in God that He can do anything. Everything is possible through Him. And what I did then was I switched to things that were part of my personal life and affected others as well. So I have a total of 5 books written, and Brainstorms was the second book. They Made You the Boss Now What was my first book. And after Brainstorms, every other book deals with some kind of personal situation that I've gone through and provides hope and advice and counsel to others who are also going through this particular issue.
That's very selfless of you. Do you think that your belief in God or a higher being really gave you that firm foundation of strength to really overcome everything?
Absolutely. I couldn't have done it without Jesus. I surrendered my life to Him and I stopped trying to manage my own affairs. I just said, Jesus, take care of it. And He's taken care of everything ever since, including this interview today.
We made through quite a challenge today and we survived it.
Yeah.
Yep. So in your book, you shared like 27 practical tips for people to cope with their illness, right? And one of them was being more attuned with your body.
Yes.
How can you encourage people, or how can you tell people to be more in tune with their physical body and emotional body? Because I know like it's kind of vague. So how do you make it more practical for people?
Well, I think your body tells you, I know your body tells you when you're really sick. And the first thing to do, of course, is to get to a doctor, or a hospital or emergency room. But there's so many other ways that I listen to my body. My first brain hemorrhage and stroke was a massive bleed on the right-hand side of my brain. It was so large that the neurosurgeon thought it was probably an artery that had burst. And that was a very serious occasion. I was living abroad at the time, and my wife called the National Health Service, the government healthcare people, and told them that I was sick and I was unable to get out of bed or walk downstairs or to do anything. And so I couldn't come to them. And they said, that's okay. We'll send somebody to you. I was very greatly encouraged because remember, at this point in time, I had no idea what was happening. I had never had a brain bleed. I had never had a stroke. I just knew that I was really sick. And so the doctor showed up at the house. He came upstairs to me, asked a few questions, did a quick medical examination, which did not include a neurological check, and said to me, there's really nothing wrong with you. All you need is a lot of rest. You've probably been working yourself so hard. You Americans come in early and leave late and overload yourself with issues. Back off for a few days, lay in bed and catch up on your rest. I am today sitting here aghast at that diagnosis. I went 19 months more without being diagnosed or treated for this huge, massive brain bleed. 19 months later, I returned to the United States to resume my US job. And one of the first things I did was to go to my doctor and tell them the events of the bleed in England. My doctor agreed to send me for an MRI and a CAT scan. And she made an appointment with a neurologist for the next day. I went to that MRI and CAT scan, again, not knowing what I was going to see. Intuitively, I always thought my body was telling me there's something wrong with my brain. I told the doctors in England that, and they didn't listen. They disregarded it. They treated me for vertigo and tinnitus and migraine headaches and a lot of other things, nothing which was related to a brain bleed, the size of the one I had. I figured out, I did what the doctor said and went back to bed. I normally lay on the left-hand side of my head, but I figured out that when I laid on my right side, that the headache, which was excruciating, got better. And so I did that for a week. And I was told later when I saw a proper neurosurgeon in America that saved my life. He called me a walking miracle. He scheduled surgery for as soon as possible. And I underwent surgery to remove that huge cavernous angioma, the vascular malformation from the right side of my head in February of 1992. It took me 2 years to recover from that. But that didn't stop. As soon as I knew that I was damaged and unable to function properly again, I grabbed myself by the shoulders and said, I am not going to let this defeat me. I will recover, and I will recover fully. And so I took on a regimen of physical exercises and, treatments. I tried non-standard or outside of the realm of medical science cures. For instance, I tried acupuncture and electrical nerve stimulation. My face was drooping on the left side, which caused me to drool out of the left side of my mouth. Also caused me to be unable to speak clearly because my mouth wasn't working correctly. My left eye was open all the time. I had no ability to close it, even at bedtime. These were things that I simply had to deal with. So I tried electrical nerve stimulation. That I found a genuine Chinese acupuncturist who had studied acupuncture and taught acupuncture in China. And his specialty was reversing paralysis. And that's what I had, paralysis of the face. After a month and a half, my droopy face went away. I also tried biohealing, biophoton healing, which is again, a non-traditional treatment. I had brain fog. I didn't try this until a couple of years ago. And I went to the Tesla MedBed Center in Butler, Pennsylvania, and they bombarded me with photons, which is an element that's present in the body and its job is to help you to heal from injury or illness. But there's not enough of it in your body to heal a massive brain bleed. So they bombarded me for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, I walked out of there without a walker, without a cane, and my brain fog was gone. It took 32 years for me to lose that brain fog, but it was worth it. It was really worth it.
That's a miracle. I guess going outside the traditional ways of treatment really helps too. I think it's also a process of trial and error, right? But I think the key thing that I've learned is being intuitive and being so attuned with your body that, because like you live with your body like since day one, right? Like you know your body more than doctors sometimes. So I think that's what you did, right? Right? Exactly. So wow, imagine if you didn't listen to your body and just slept on the other side of the bed. That would have
I
been
also listened to
a
my
different
body
story.
telling me that I needed to eat salmon, which is something I ate occasionally, but not, constantly. But Sharon fixed me salmon, all kinds of salmon, grilled salmon, baked salmon, salmon Alexander's, salmon this, salmon salad, and I ate salmon twice a day. My body was also telling me to eat vegetables, which were high in vitamin K. And those vegetables and the vitamin K helped me to not bleed again. And I never understood why, but my body craved milkshakes. Sharon would make me a giant milkshake with real ice cream and real milk and real bananas every day. And it was probably more than 32 ounces, but I drank it every day and it made me feel so much better. I think it probably made me feel better because I was eating something that was delicious.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't listen to my body when I crave milkshakes, but I'll take your word for it. I'll say just Les told me to. I shouldn't feel guilty. But yeah, so just seeking non-traditional ways, being attuned with your body and really listening to it. You also mentioned that, you emphasize the importance of, relationships, having a really firm support system around you. Do you have any advice for people that are, going through a difficult time in their health journey? Do you have any advice for the patients and also the caregivers?
Marry a woman like my wife, Sharon. That's my advice. I mean, in the beginning, she was my support system. She was my caretaker. I was confined to bed and confined to home for 6 weeks after that brain surgery and brainstem surgery. She took care of me like no other person would. She gave up the activities of her own life to make sure that I had my own activities. My advice, by the way, and I'm going to work on a book about caretaking and caregiving, but my advice is to not allow your primary caretaker, especially if it's your wife, to give her life up completely just to take care of you. We worked it out so that I was very tired and wanted to sleep all the time in the early days after that event. And we worked it out so that when I took my afternoon nap, Sharon was able to leave me without worrying about me because I was in bed and immobile, and there was no risk of me trying to get up and fall or anything. So she went out and did her shopping, and not only for groceries, but she likes to shop for other things as well. And then I told her at that point in time, I said, Sharon, right now I'm a full-time job, but I'm working hard to become a part-time job. and eventually I will be self-sufficient again. So don't give up on me. I never gave up on myself. I never lost hope. I never lost faith in God.
That is so beautiful. That is so rare. Honestly, you could write a whole book about how to find a woman like Sharon, and
I
it would
did.
still be hard to follow. Yeah, you did, and we're going to talk about that. But I just wanted to acknowledge how amazing your mindset was through it all, how you remained so selfless still, and how you said that you wanted to work on becoming a part-time job. And I think a lot of caretakers kind of feel guilty when they're not selfless enough and they're not, sacrificing their whole lives for the person that they're caring for. And I think what you said was really validating, because even caretakers have their needs, right? Even they can get burnt out.
Yeah.
And that's completely normal. It happens to the best of us. Compassion fatigue is real. And I want to talk about that a little bit. You said that you would give time to Sharon to, like do her shopping and take care of herself. What other key tips do you have for caretakers that are experiencing compassion fatigue?
Well, I was extremely grateful, when I was bedbound and homebound for weeks, to have physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists come to my house instead of me having to go to them, because I was just not able physically to do that. And so to my wife, Sharon, I said, let's talk to the doctor and see what he can do to get my therapist to come to my house until I'm able to get out and and visit them myself again. And I think that was very helpful, because my physical therapist began to help me rebuild my strength, and my occupational therapist taught me how to do things like take a shower or get dressed, or just everyday normal stuff. Even with my infirmity. And my speech therapist, as I said, helped me to find a path to heal my droopy left side of my face. She tried electrical nerve stimulation with portable devices. And after 2 weeks, I saw no progress. So I told her I was going to explore other options. And that's when I found an acupuncturist who accompanied that with electrical nerve stimulation. If that sounds vague, what he did was stick needles in the nerve endings on the left side of my face, and then hook an electrode to the end of those needles, and then turn the juice up on the electricity. It reminds me of Fletch, the movie Fletch, when the evil doctor, whoever her name was torturing Fletch's brother. Oh, that was Bill Murray's brother. Anyhow, um, that was a big relief. I mean, it was shortly thereafter, probably a year later, I was good enough to travel. A lot of things I couldn't do. But by the way, I always accentuated on the positive. It was worthless for me to sit around and think about all the things I couldn't do. So I directed my mind to think about the things that I could do, things that I couldn't have done, 3 months earlier. And I used to take advantage. They helped me so much.
Yeah, it's honestly so admirable to have that kind of mindset, right? It's not easy at all, especially when the evidence is pointing to a different direction, especially when it's health related. And you mentioned that you never really gave up on yourself. And I think that also highly contributes to Sharon being or not experiencing compassion fatigue as much because you are self-sufficient and you draw the strength from within rather than like completely relying on somebody else when they also have their own needs. And I love that. Right. And I want to talk about Sharon a little bit. You were talking about salmon, and I was
I'll
thinking,
tell
oh
you
my
one more
God.
thing first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I include my contact information at the back of my books. And so people can call me or email me or ask me to visit them in the hospital or whatever they think they need me for. And I get a lot of those communications from people, mostly asking for advice and providing, they want encouragement. And so I'm able to do that.
That is so generous. I don't think any other author would do that. What made you think of that?
Well, again, I look for the positives, and I wasn't able to do it for a long time. But my church, the church that I went to, had a ministry which was all about visiting sick people in the hospital. I'm Roman Catholic, and the way it worked was I went to the hospital and picked up a list of Roman Catholics that were being treated in the hospital. It gave me their name, their age, lots of information about them, and of course their room number. So I'd walk from room to room, and I'd pray with them. I would provide them with encouragement. They could see me, somebody who heretofore was unable to do anything, and now I was walking around from hospital to hospital room, counseling others. I enjoyed it. And it was kind of amusing because I used to dress up to do this. I wore a suit, and people often mistook me for a priest or a preacher. And I'd have to correct them. I say, no, that's not my calling in life, but I think I can help you.
Yeah, I don't think you have to be a priest to do great things, right? Which you are. And I think regardless of religion, a lot of people can learn from this. I think you would inspire a lot of people to also do that kind of thing, like visit people at the hospital and encourage them, or it doesn't have to be a hospital, can start their own communities, right? And again, so inspiring. I want to talk about your relationship with Sharon, which you wrote about in your book,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people talk about, the secret of a healthy relationship, but I want to talk about the most underrated, the most overlooked. What do you think is the most overlooked aspect of a relationship you think is?
I think it all centers around as we grow older and live together longer, somehow the passion that we felt when we first met and we were dating, goes away. And I never let that happen. I'm 76 years old and my wife is 74, and we kiss romantically, passionately every day. We write each other love notes. We take care of each other's needs. And I treat her like we were still teenagers. I can't wait to see her every morning. And I take consolace when I get to lay down next to her in bed at night. She's a fantastic person. And I thank God every day for blessing me with her. We were introduced by a mutual friend. I was at a friend's house on a Friday night one night. This is back when I was a sophomore in college. And a girl that I knew from high school was there. And she said, Les, I have met the girl who is perfect for you. how would you like to meet her? And I said, I'd love to meet her. It turns out she worked in one of her dad's two drugstores. He was a pharmacist and he owned two drugstores in Wichita, Kansas. So she said, well, she'll be working there tomorrow on Saturday. Come in and I'll make sure I introduce you. Well, I walked through that door the next morning. There were lots of young women working in there. Some of them were Sharon's friends. Some of them were Sharon's sisters. But my eyes focused immediately on Sharon. And I said to myself, I sure hope this is the girl that Betty's going to introduce me to. We talked for a few minutes. She asked her dad if she could take a quick break. Her dad said, sure. I asked her out for a date, and she said yes. She'd only known me for 10 minutes, you know. Anyhow, we had a great first date. We went to a movie, and then we went to the original founding Pizza Hut in America. It was located in Wichita, Kansas. The Carney brothers, who Sharon knew and had babysitted for, started the business of Pizza Hut. And we also had pizza and beer there. And my son still believes that Sharon drank beer. And I'm not sure she did or not, but I drank some beer. When I dropped her off at her parents' house at the end of the night, I couldn't wait until I saw her again. All I could think about is, how soon tomorrow can I drop by the house and make contact with her again? I just didn't want to live without her. It's amazing. We only known each other for less than a day, but I was hooked. And that's why when we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary, I said to her, Sharon, I have been waiting since the very first time we met to celebrate this occasion with you. On my 51st wedding anniversary, I said, Sharon, thank you for being my trophy wife for 51 years. And today it's not unusual for us to be in a restaurant or some other, environment where there are other people around and have somebody come up to me or Sharon and say, you have a beautiful wife. And that makes me feel really proud. I tell her that it's good for my image to be seen with her in public. So I've asked her for dates ever since, and she's never turned me down. Every time I ask her to go on a date, she says yes.
That's so sweet. Do you believe in soulmates? That's so sweet. Um, well, how do you get past the honeymoon phase, but also stay there? Because the way you talk about Sharon, you're still in love with her. You can't wait to see her. And a lot of people think that familiarity breeds contempt, right? The more you spend time with someone, the more you kind of like get tired of them, and the more every habit becomes annoying. But how do you actively remain in that honeymoon phase?
Well, it's just the way I feel about her. Um, I think I'm the luckiest man in the world. And I tell her all the time that I don't deserve her. She is so sweet, so kind, and so caring. And we have always been madly in love with each other, and we still are. And excuse me. And she needs her own time, and I make sure she gets that. There are many days when I go off to play golf and she goes off shopping or doing something like going to lunch with one of her friends or whatever. And I tell her when we separate that I'm looking forward to the end of the day when we could be together again. I think my illnesses, I can't say that I ever lost my feelings for Sharon, but if anything, my illnesses strengthened my relationship with Sharon and all that she did for me. And they also brought me closer to God. I've always been a Christian. When I was a kid, my mother and father and my brother and sister never went to church. My mother would like to have gone to church, but we were poor. And back in those days, you dressed up to go to church. And mom couldn't afford a dress up outfit that was suitable for church going. So at the time, I was unhappy about this, but she would literally push me out the door on Sunday morning and tell me to walk to the Methodist church, which was only 3 blocks away, and go to Sunday school. I felt really bad because I was, people would say, "Are you here alone? Where are your parents? Where's your family?" And, I couldn't keep that up. But the message that she sent me stayed with me forever because she told me it was important to make God and Jesus an integral part of my life. My Aunt Shirley and my Aunt Phyllis also had me over to their homes on Saturday nights and took me to church with them the next day. And I always remember when my mother's father, my grandpa Emily, announced to the family that all he wanted for his 65th birthday was for his entire family to attend church services with him. Those things had such an impact on me.
That's so sweet and that's so rare. It's really interesting listening to you, Les. And you also had a book about moving 16 times, right? Was that with Sharon?
I'm sorry, what? Moving? Oh, moving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We moved
Um,
16 times in less than 50 years of marriage. And then we finally settled
wow.
down at a couple of places. But I was in the Air Force for
Mhm.
11 years. And some of those moves were transfers to different bases. And some of them were to attend special schools to develop me as a senior officer in the Air Force. And I learned a lot about what it takes to move successfully. One of the biggest things, biggest piece of advice I offer in that book is that never move anything that you're going to throw away at the other end. I mean, it's just unneeded work. And you're sorting through your stuff anyhow, and take that time as you're getting ready to move to put that stuff out for goodwill or for um, any other charitable organization.
Yeah. That's really good advice, honestly. And that saves you a lot of time too and a lot of space. I want to talk about another book, your leadership book,
Yeah,
right? And throughout our whole discussion, I think you have really modeled what a good leader should be. A
yeah,
man that can lead his own life, not boss other people around. And I think that is the true mark of a leader, right? And I want to talk about what one piece of advice do you have for starting leaders?
Well, first of all, did you ever think about the fact that boss is a four-letter word? I never use that term, except in the title of that book. My main advice to a new leader, which is going into his job for the first day, is to get your mindset in the right direction, because you want your people to trust you and to believe in you. But those are things that aren't given to you as a result of a new title. You have to work hard to earn those. So don't try to go in the first day and start figuring out what you're going to change. You will change something, I'm sure, but don't make that the topic of discussion. I would interview, on my first day, I would interview every single member of my new team. Now, I never moved up within the organization. I always changed jobs to move up in an organization. So, they didn't know me and I didn't know them. So I needed to sit down and get to know them. Early in my career, after college, I was in the Air Force. I had a job that resulted in 500 people in the state of Alaska working for me. And I traveled around and met each and every one of those 500 people. I listened to them about what was going right and what was going wrong. And I helped those to alleviate the things that were going wrong. I knew their names. I knew their family. I knew about their family. I knew about their hobbies and their interests, so that every time I met them, I could greet them by name and ask them how fishing was going. There weren't many golf courses in the tundra of Alaska, so people tended to fish and hunt. I think it's important to know and have an intimate relationship with the people who work for you. When I was at the Limited, every year, my wife and I would open our home to all the people who worked for me at the Limited for a Christmas party. And the invitation read, "Please join me and a guest for a Christmas celebration at my house. And if you don't bring your children, don't bother coming." Christmas, I love children, and Christmas is for children more than anybody else. So we always had some small gift for them. And 10 years later, I encountered one of the people who used to work for me at the Limited, and he had his son with him. And his son said to me, "I remember you. You're Mr. Duncan. You had us over to your house for Christmas, and you gave me a Beanie Baby." It made an impression on him, and it made me happy.
That's wonderful. I think the more the world progresses, the more fast-paced it becomes, and the more leaders or bosses treat the people under them like numbers rather than real human beings, like you do. And I think what you said, it kind of reminds us to treat human beings like human beings and not numbers or employees or a ladder, right? And I want to talk about the advices you would give to anybody, may it be like moving or losing weight or going through health challenges or trying to maintain a relationship. What advice can you give to all these people?
set goals in your life for all the situations you're involved in, and then dedicate all your energy, all your hope, and all your being to achieving those goals. My goal when my worst experiences were my massive brain hemorrhages. And as soon as I realized that my body was heavily damaged, like I might have said earlier, I grabbed myself by the shoulders and said, I'm not going to allow myself to live the rest of my life like this. I'm going to recover fully. My doctors used to call me, well, I don't know what word they used, but they thought I was from another planet. They told me it was not possible for me to recover fully, but I showed them. I think, again, Sharon and I both had parents who celebrated 60-year wedding anniversaries. And they loved each other. Not quite like Sharon and I do, but they did love each other. And they said they were good role models for Sharon and I. Sharon had 8 brothers and sisters. And again, her father was a pharmacist, but, feeding and clothing 9 kids, plus yourself and your wife, was something that was hard to overcome. But he worked extra hours. He did everything he could to make sure that his family got what they needed. My father was a diesel truck mechanic. My mother was a homemaker. By the way, Sharon's mother kept the books for a doctor. She had a job. My mother didn't have a job. She wanted a job to supplement our family income because it was meager. But my father insisted that her job was to stay home and take care of the house and the children, the cooking and the cleaning, all that old-fashioned stuff. We lived in a tiny house. There were 5 of us. I had myself, I had a younger brother and a younger sister, and my mother and father. The house was 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. My mother used to struggle to keep food on the table. She waited eagerly. Every Wednesday morning, the local newspaper ran these supermarket ads with things that were on sale for that week. I can remember her waiting for the ad for the local grocery store that was just a couple of miles away from us that said hamburgers on sale for 3 pounds for $1. And she would go and she would stock up as much as she could with the money she had, hamburger at $3 a pound. So most of our meals were centered around hamburger. But every Sunday, she cooked chicken, fried chicken. She received so many compliments from people who ate her fried chicken. People said that she made the best fried chicken they'd ever had. What I didn't notice was that she would buy a whole fryer, and cut it up into pieces, breasts, drumsticks, thighs, and the back. My mother always insisted that she have the back because that's what she liked the most. Well, that was nonsense. And I didn't realize this till I was older. But backs don't have a whole lot of meat on it. So she was eating the back so that the rest of the family can enjoy the more meaty parts of the chicken.
That's so selfless. I think you got it from your mom, I guess.
Yeah.
You've lived such a rich life, Les. And, You have just wonderful stories to tell, and I have never heard anything negative from you. And if anything, I think a lot of our viewers and myself can really start to realize that focusing on capabilities rather than deficits would really overall help your mentality and your health and your relationships, right? And Les, I want to do something new with you. So I have created this segment and I really want to get into your brain. So I have prepared 3 questions for you with like hypothetical scenarios, and I want to know how you would deal with that. Okay. So let's start with the first one. Okay. Let's pretend that you are a newly promoted leader in an organization and you are facing kind of like resistance from the new team. Maybe they're mean, or maybe they're just passive, maybe they're not listening to you. What would you do to establish your authority?
Well, I think that has to be done gradually. As I said before, you have to earn the respect. And so let me give you an example. In every new job I took it under the condition that I spend the first month of my employment working out in the field alongside blue-collar workers, getting my fingernails dirty, doing the same blue-collar jobs that they did, and at the same time collecting information about how I, as a leader in the headquarters, could make their lives easier and more and less eventful. I also insisted that I be given the latitude to change people in my organization. Some of these people had been with the company for 20 or 30 years. And, making that kind of a change is really difficult. But my bosses always agreed that they would allow those 2 conditions. So when I went out, I worked for the largest natural gas company in the United States. And when I went out to the field to gather information about what we at the headquarters could do to make their jobs easier, almost everyone I talked to said that the work orders for these people didn't come out until 9 o'clock in the morning. However, they were required to be on the job at 7:30. So the first hour and a half of their work day was spent waiting to find out what they were going to do for the next 6.5 hours. I took that back to my people, who are IT people, and I said, I'm sure you guys can solve this problem for them. And one of my head technical people said, I can have that done in less than a day. They'll get their work orders by 6:30 a.m. I took that back to my people and said, you guys made a big difference in the business today, because these people no longer are sitting around waiting for work to be assigned to them. They're going to work immediately, which is what they wanted to do. Keep it up. Your job is important to the business.
Wow. I think establishing relationships is what really matters, right? Before even establishing an authority, you got to know your people. And you really gave back those hours to them, right? You gave back their lives, basically. Okay, let's move to the second question.
Okay.
So, Les, think that you're a caregiver, right? And you're quite burnt out and you don't want to feel guilty. How would you kind of like just inject ways of like self-care every now and then, right? Maybe you don't have a lot of time in your hands. Maybe you cannot go shopping, but how do you just every minute or so, or like every hour or so, care for yourself and take care of your burnout?
Well, the first step is to realize that you are burned out. And I think once you realize that, you'll find ways to continue to be a caretaker, a caregiver, without sacrificing your own personal needs. My father had full-time, 24 hours a day, 7-day a week nursing care before he died several years ago at the age of 92. And I saw his caregivers come and work 12-hour shifts, living at his home, feeding him, doing everything. I mean, it was really a hard and taxing job. So when Sharon and I went to visit, we made sure they got a break. We took over their job for them because we were perfectly capable of taking care of my father. We bought them lunch, told them to go outside the facility and spend time relaxing and eating. We thanked them so much for all the time, all the energy, and all their training that went into caring for my father. I think just knowing that you're appreciated is a big deal. I'm afraid that my father didn't tell them that, but I did. I said, we really appreciate you and all you do for my father.
It must have been a relief, like just those simple words must have meant a lot to them, just like just unburden them a little bit, right? But
Yeah.
you're so right. Acceptance is really the first step, accepting that you're burnt out.
Yeah.
And it's fine. And you can get back up again. And you're not a bad person for feeling burnt out. Okay. Third and last question. Okay. So I know you've gone through this, but for people that are going through it. So imagine you are at that moment where you got your first diagnosis. You're confused, overwhelmed, uncertain about the future. What is the key step would you take to regain that courage and strength to look on the brighter side?
Well, in another interview that I did just last week or week before, the question was, when did you first find out that you had to have brain surgery?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer I gave was, how did you feel was the real question. First answer was, I felt shocked because, as I've already explained, I went 19 months without being treated or diagnosed by the National Health Service in a foreign country. And I saw a dozen doctors, none of whom were specialists. They were all just general practitioners. And none of them, and I kept telling them that I felt there was something wrong with my brain, and they dismissed it. So I felt shocked and I felt angry because, as I said to you before, when I finally met a neurosurgeon who would pay attention to me, and they did an MRI and a CAT scan, it revealed an explosive rupture of a massive brain hemorrhage on the right side of my brain. I'm still bitter that I went 19 months and could have died. In fact, my neurosurgeon told me you would have died if you hadn't laid your head on the pillow right and put pressure on that bleeding spot so that the bleeding would stop.
You saved your own life.
Yeah, I saved my own life. Again, I listen to my body, but, part of that was God working through me. I prayed to him and I said, Jesus, I don't know what's wrong with me. please help me to find out what I can do to get better again. And as I said before, I normally lay on the left side of my head. Well, that act of laying on the right side of my head was unusual for me. But I had an excruciating headache, the worst you could ever imagine. And it made it feel better when I laid on the right side. So I just kept doing that, and it worked.
Les, thank you so much for inspiring and encouraging us today. I am sure that our viewers, like myself, listening to you right now, have picked up so much inspiration and encouragement from your words. I mean, like if you have gone through it, like we all can, with the right mindset and with the right people, right? Les, do you have any projects coming up? Do you have any books? Where can we find you?
Well, I have a website. It's Leslie, Laslie, Duncan.com. It has all of my books on it. It has movie trailers for all my books on it. It has lots of background information about me personally, about the fact that I've worked in 3 different segments, industry segments. I've worked in the government as an Air Force officer. I worked in retail as a CIO, and I worked in the energy business twice. And all that information is in my book. I'm sorry, it's on my website. Most of it's in my book as well. My email address is lesinplano. We used to live in Plano, Texas, at gmail.com. My cell phone number is 214-912-0140. I really enjoy it when somebody calls me and says, I heard you speak, or I read your book, or whatever, or I heard about you from a friend, and I just had to give you a call and see which advice and counsel you can give to me. Sometimes I help them to choose the right doctor, which, by the way, is the most important employee you'll ever hire. You know, too many people, my mother included, go to the local emergency room and accept the local specialist who supposedly is skilled and trained to address their particular illness when there are so many other better doctors. My mother lived in Wichita, Kansas, and believe me, there was no good neurosurgeon in Wichita, Kansas, because I think there was only one. My mother went to him, and she accused him, she went to him with pain, abdominal and back pain. And he told her her only problem was that she was too heavy. She needed to lose weight. She wasted her time with this guy for 2 years when she finally called the Mayo Clinic. My mother drove her up there to Minnesota, and in 3 days, the Mayo Clinic had diagnosed her condition. It was a cervical spine bleed, C2. Mine was a cervical spine bleed, C3. She opted to have surgery. I opted to not have surgery, because what happened to my mother was she went through with the operation and she was immediately paralyzed from her waist down. Collateral damage, they call that. I was talking to my sister the other day, and she said, you know, Mom was doing pretty good until she underwent the surgery. Had she just not done that, she might even be alive today.
That's crazy. just one action and the whole trajectory of your life changes.
Yes.
But I'm glad that you made the right choices for yourself and you saved your own life. Leslie, again, thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I think I've learned so much and I didn't even have to call you. So I got all of this for free. But thank you so much. For those watching, again, check Leslie out at leslieduncan.com. Check all his books out there. You can find it all there. All right. And to all of our viewers, thank you again for tuning in to the Author Spotlight brought to you by Apex Media Global. I am your host, Monica. And if you want to watch more videos like this with remarkable authors like Leslie, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until then, listen to Leslie's words. Make every challenge an opportunity for growth. Until then, see you next time. Thank you.